welcome today. I want to run everybody through the Touchstone story. The picture that you see on here is a really interesting picture. It's one from the mangrove, Carney mangroves down in Trinidad. It's where the scarlet ibis come back at sunset every night to this one island, and it's spectacular. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's really beautiful. Touchstone's a Canadian-based company. We trade both in Toronto and on the AIM. The trading symbol's the same in both places, TXP. And what I'd like to do today is walk you through where we're at and some of the things that we've got. We're really at in the next 2 weeks, this company's going to look very, very different in what we're looking at. Let me walk through the history of why Touchstone and why we think now is the right time for people to maybe start looking at this as an opportunity. First of all, we've got some really strong production growth coming on. We've got a very large inventory of development and exploration opportunities. You'll see in the slides going forward, when we started presenting 4 or 5 years ago, it was sort of a well by well. And now it's really progressed to being where it's a program. You can see the land, you can see what it looks like for the next 5 years. And it's really developed from being an exploration company to one that's a full rounded production exploration company now. The reserve production that we see, or the reserves, really justify that production growth going forward. The main focus for us right now is to convert our reserves to production, and we'll show you how we're doing that. At the same time, what we want to do is continue to add to that base. Continue to add to that opportunity list so that we can continue to high grade those opportunities as we go forward. And we're applying some pretty interesting technology. I know that's something that maybe we don't talk enough about in our business, but there are some real technology and advancements for enhancing production. And the last thing we obviously want to do is increase the shareholder value. And I think when you see the growth in the production, you can see how that's going to impact the stock price for the shareholders. We're a little bit unique, although, as I say, we're listed in Toronto and London. All of our assets are in Trinidad. Picture you see on the left-hand side is actually downtown Trinidad. There's a really strong demand for oil and gas in Trinidad, and I'll show you some stats on that. And it's a country right now that is very, very supportive of our business. They really want to, as the energy minister says, get the product out of the ground as quickly as possible. And sometimes, we run into some obstacles on the regulation side, but now that we have sort of a presence in Trinidad, we understand how we can speed up some of those processes, and quite frankly, we know the right people to call now, so that that works very well with us. And when we look at the region itself, probably the most exciting part, and it should be the underpinning of any oil and gas company, is the rocks are spectacular. The geology is really spectacular. Up dip end of the Venezuelan basin, arguably the largest resource basin in the world, and now with Guyana not very far away, really coming on, you can really see the potential of the region. The other thing that we've done, and I think it talks to maybe the expertise of the management of the board, is we're really focusing on keeping a really good, strong balance sheet. Our commodity prices have been moving all over. I know Steve was just talking away. Lithium prices have moved around. We went from negative oil price a couple of years ago to 120 to where we're back now at 70. I mean, so one of the big things for us is to make sure that we're really resilient. And the other thing that we'll talk a little bit about today is the product mix is going to change for us. We've basically been a 100% oil company, and within the next few days, literally, we switched to be about a 70%, 80% natural gas company. So some exciting things on that front. Quick look at a glance, 142 million pounds market cap. When we went public 6 years ago, June 26th, back in 2017, we raised 2 million pounds as our initial offering. So certainly we've seen some, excuse me, some good appreciation. Daily production, just over 2,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day in the first quarter. And when this new gas plant comes on, I'm going to talk about here in the next few days, what you'll see is that number will jump to over 10,000 BOEs a day. And I think we'll give you a pretty clear view of how we can get double that again as we go forward. Talks a little bit about funds flow netbacks. I don't think we really need to focus on that because the company will look very different when you look at the second half of the year versus the first half of the year. At the end of the quarter, we had about 10 million of cash on hand, and that, along with increasing our bank line down in Trinidad, we're now able to position to get this plant on, and then that generates, I know I've referred to it as a wall of cash before, but it really does generate a bunch of cash for us to reinvest. Talked a little bit about The value of the assets, what you can see there is market cap 142 million pounds, and down below you can see the value in US dollars of the assets independently evaluated. So there's still a nice gap between the two, and that's really us taking and converting these reserves from reserves into cash flow, and then I think we'll see that gap narrow. So appreciated the patience from the market. Trinidad Oil and Gas, you know, this is an island located just off the coast of Venezuela. It's been in the oil and gas business for 100 years. It's got huge refinery that ran for 50 years before they closed it down. But on top of that, what they have is they've got this Atlantic LNG, very, very large LNG facility. It's probably still in the top 10. And then the Point Lisas complex that you see up there has fertilizer plants, ammonia, all sorts of industrial plants. And really what that does is there's a natural market for any of the gas that we find. In the chart that you see on the left-hand side there shows you where gas production has been and where it is right now. So call it somewhere between 2.5 and 3 billion cubic feet a day. Interestingly enough, if everything, if they had more gas, they could consume 4 billion cubic feet a day. So that's the gap that all of us are trying to fill in Trinidad. And then below that is the oil and condensate production. You can see how that's been declining. And that's really the reason why the minister has been saying, you know, let's do these land offerings. Let's get projects on stream faster. Let's do everything that we can to make this happen. But certainly, again, every barrel of oil that we find gets marketed very quickly. I'll talk a little bit more about this map in a moment here. But so if this is a map that basically shows our land holdings, as well as sort of a geological fairway of where we see things. The yellow is the land that we think that we currently have, that we think sits in this shaded area, which is a geological term called the Herrera Turbidite Fairway. And that's where we've had the greatest success in the last 4 or 5 years in some of our exploration. The orange lands are sort of our traditional lands where we drill some really nice oil wells, and they basically pay the bills and while we bring on these bigger projects that we've been bringing on. Earlier this year, we talked about a deal, and it goes to that point that I made about adding land so that we keep this inventory full. And basically what we're doing with a local company is we're going to swap these black lands that you see over here that are in black for this gray shaded area over here called Rio Claro and Balata East. And the net effect is we'll lose probably about 50 or 60 barrels a day of production, but we pick up some really great exploration acreage, which again is that portfolio that we're trying to fill up. A couple other lines to show you on here on this map is this big red line is the main gas line. There is another gas line that runs to the south here, and that green line is the oil line that goes through the middle. So you can kind of see how they intersect directly into the area that we're in. But again, this property swap gets us that inventory that we want to see. And then last month, they announced the results of the onshore bid round, or a government offering up lands. We had actually bid on 5 blocks. The primary block that we really wanted was that Sapero block, and you can see that we were awarded that. We also like this big block to the north, but the government would like us to come back and maybe propose some little more favorable terms. So we're on an exclusive basis with them to negotiate that. But you can see that we've continued to fill in that trend. If all of that kind of happens, what you really see on this particular map is that we end up owning a very, very large chunk through the central and southern part of Trinidad. And when I talk about, you know, a 5-year opportunity, we just presented a 5-year plan to the board, and it was about a quarter of the prospects that we have in inventory that made the cut for the first 5 years. So we can really start to see how we can go from that 2,000 BOEs a day north of 10,000, then where we go from there. So it's really an exciting project in what we have. So talk a little bit about what we've done and sort of where we're at today. Coho, for instance, that's the first well that we discovered on that property on the eastern side, that yellow property on the eastern side. We brought that on production. It's a single well into a facility that's capable of about 24 million cubic feet a day. It actually flows to the south and goes through a shell facility before it goes into the system. It was really a proof of concept. We had seen an old well in here from the 1960s that looked really interesting. we went and drilled a new well very close to that old well and got a really great well. But there was two proofs of concept. One, we wanted to prove that there was gas there. But secondly, we wanted to prove that we could drill a well to this depth under this kind of pressure. Hadn't been done in probably about 15 years in Trinidad. So we're really happy about that. And that came on last October. We then moved over to a place called Cascadura, which is really the flagship for what we're doing, and it's the one that's going to sort of change things for us dramatically. We've drilled 2 wells there, and just to kind of give you the size, like these 2 wells combined will do over 9,000 BOEs a day of production, and that's what takes us from 2,000 to something north of 10,000 BOEs a day when they come on stream. You know, you can see it's very large reserves. There's another step up in that production. Plus, we've got 8 additional development locations approved. And it's been a really arduous process to get everything done that we had to do, not only getting the wells drilled, but then we needed to build a gas facility. We needed to build some pipelines. We needed to get a gas market agreement in place. But happy to say that all is going to come to fruition here very shortly. And I'll talk about timing on that in a minute. And then we went over and drilled a prospect called Royston. And to be honest with you, we didn't know whether this was going to be light oil or it was going to be gas. It appears like it's light oil. At this point, we're doing an extended production test on that particular well, and we have to start at the bottom zones first and work our way up. And right now we're testing, which would be probably one of the primary zones. And you know, our view on how we disclose the testing is that we want to make sure we've got a long enough test period so that we get sort of rates that are representative of what the well is going to be able to produce at. A lot of times you get sort of flush production at the very beginning, and you want to make sure that those are sustainable. So we try to do some sort of extended test and then we put out. So that's what we've done in the past, and that's what we'll continue to do as we work through this. But this Royston prospect, when you see it on the map, is very large. There could be multiple wells to drill in here if the testing goes as planned. And then the final part is the other prospects that we see on Oratoa. When I talked about what we presented to the board, it's just that we have numerous opportunities, and we've been able to high grade them and still stayed within what I'll call our A list of opportunities in what we do. So it gives you a little idea of activity. These are very big wells for onshore. Like they're, you know, we're drilling down to 11,000 feet, and you know, the one particular well at Cascadura, it tested about 400, an absolute open flow of 400 million cubic feet a day. At surface, we were restricted to about 20 million cubic feet a day. But these are just very, very large wells, and it talks about the opportunities, potential in Trinidad. So if we take a look at that Cascadura a little bit closer, what you can see here is these flames down here. Those are the first 2 wells that we drilled, and there's the facility that we're building. That'll all get piped into this red pipeline that goes out to the main pipeline. And then the oil, and there's about 20 barrels per million. So not only do we bring on a lot of gas, but we do bring on some very nice light oil. Initially, we'll be trucked to a facility, and then we'll build a pipeline to tie it in. But what you can see here is that red is the 3D defined structure. And what we did is we've got 8 development locations. I think realistically, we'll probably need 4 of those, maybe 5 of those to drill to drain the entire structure. But we now have approval that we can go ahead and do that. And we spent about a year getting the environmental approval on the entire project. Something that we've learned in Trinidad is a better way to go, is you get the approval for the whole thing, and then you can kind of run and take off on what you want to do. But you know, again, to take a look at the 2 wells initially, it'll be about 9,200 BOEs a day of production. And then right now the rig is sitting over here at this CAS C site, and we'll drill at least those first 2 wells you see there, CAS 2 and CAS 3 off of there. And it's ready to go. The only thing we're waiting on right now is to have that plant up and running. And that'll generate, number one, the cash we need to drill the wells, but it'll also make sure that as soon as we find something there, what we'll be able to do is bring it into the facility. The facility itself is designed for 200 million cubic feet a day and about 4,000 barrels, 4,000 to 5,000 barrels a day of liquids. When I say liquids, it's actually light oil. Initially, capability will be about 90 million cubic feet a day of gas and about 2,000 barrels a day. And give you an idea, it's almost like an offshore platform design where you build it and then you drill in to fill it up to capacity. So that's the approach that we've taken. really interesting construction on this. James, our COO, was telling me we're probably going to be north of about 75,000 man hours on this project by the time we're done here in the next couple of weeks. And we're just going to be able to build and bring everything that we need into that project. So this will be a backbone for the company, certainly, as we go forward. Then we talk about Royston, and what you can see here is the Black Star is the well that we're testing right now. Won't really talk a whole bunch about that testing until we've got that extended test on it and we know where we're at. But what you can see is those green stars are basically where we would probably drill at least 2, but maybe up to 4 wells per green star there to bring that on production. Production as an oil play comes on much quicker than gas. You don't need the facility. Basically, we can truck it out of there while we build the pipeline and the infrastructure and what we want to do. So stay tuned on this one. I think we'll have production results out and lots more to go. But it's a very thick pay zone. It's almost a couple thousand feet, so we have to test it individually. And I know that sometimes the market feels like it's a little frustrated about how long we're taking, but I think you have to kind of grasp the magnitude of the size of what we're doing. We want to test each one individually so that we get good rates and a good understanding of what's in each one of the zones. So patience, which I'm not good at either, but patience is really important in here as we go forward. And then the next stage, which I think is what we really have to start focusing on, because the company has really outgrown this well by well approach that we had before. But basically what we've done now is we put in place some really great spots where we can bring any new production. We're going to have that big plant at Cascadura, we've got the plant at Coho, and we'll have a facility over here at Royston, plus the property swap gives us this facility up here at Balata East. And what that means is that all of these prospects that you see here now have a home. So we shorten that timeline dramatically of when we can drill them. To give you an idea, at Coho, along with drilling a second well at Coho, we can probably drill from that same pad down to Gibba. We can put a location up here, drill sturgeon, char, pike, and everything else that we need, and then just bring that gas over to Cascadura. Same thing at Kokanee. If that works, it comes over to Cascadura. So you start to see the real economies of scale of what we can do out in this part of the world, and how we can go well beyond where we are now. And that includes Steelhead, which I think will be probably one of the next projects that we have to go. But one thing we have right now is we are opportunity rich, and it's really a matter of us now prioritizing to meet the cash flow streams that we have. So what's the near term? The near term will be to complete the final 2 tests at Royston 1X, and we'll talk about those as we go, and then we can put together a development plan. Completion of the Cascadura production facility. This weekend we will be pulling the plugs on those 2 wells, so there's safety plugs in them. You don't want them live while everything's going on. And what that'll allow us to do is then start to run real gas through the facility. And then once all those safety procedures have been done and everything looks good, we'll be able to go to first production. So it's been a great partnership with us and the National Gas Company in Trinidad. They built the 1.7 kilometer pipeline. It's a 20-inch line capable of 250 million cubic feet a day. We're kind of meeting in the middle. Our facility's getting done as their pipeline's getting done. And on our daily calls, it looks like we're just about there. So everybody's pretty excited about that. And then when those come on, they'll add the 9,200 BOEs a day. So a big uptick in what we see there. The next thing we need to do is just firm up those onshore bid blocks and talk a little bit about those. And that big block that I talked about to the north, it's a different play type than what we have. It's down in the Cretaceous, which is the deep zone, which is similar to what they're drilling up in Guyana. I haven't talked a lot about that only because we're going to focus on the Herrera. But at some point, you'll see us take 2 or 3 shots, and there'll be deep shots down to probably 15,000 feet. And I think that's kind of the next stage of exploration. So we've got this production coming on, we've got the development, and then we've got this underpinning of these exploration targets. And most of those are on 6-year licenses, so we're in no rush to do them. So it'll just be optimizing capital and rates in what we do. And then so everything else, is just kind of get a bunch of stuff done between now and the end of the year, which is really approvals and working with the government on that. And then in the midterm, we want to drill those wells in Cascadura, drill Cascadura 3 and 2. And then once they're, hopefully once they're successful, then we can continue to expand that out. Put the development drilling program together for Royston, same type of thing. And when I talked about it a little bit, sometimes we can drill a development well, but take it deeper to one of the exploration targets, which is Royston's a prime example of that, where we could go down to the Cretaceous below one of the Royston's structures. So we go to 11,000 feet for Royston, and then let's say at Kraken, we'd go down to 15,000 feet in the same wellbore, and we can evaluate both of them. So there's some real economies of scale in what we look at there. The other thing in this midterm is, I think it's really important for everybody to understand, is we've now built a bunch of the infrastructure. I know the last year has been kind of a little bit quiet on the news front for us, but that's because we built Coho. It's got excess capacity. Cascadura is going to have ability to bring additional production in. And so what that now does is we've got all this infrastructure so we can bring on new production really in a cost-effective manner and fairly quickly. So long term, just keep doing more of what we're doing and do it at a faster rate. And it's great that there's an opportunity for us to grow into the markets. The other thing that we want to do is we want to keep doing what we've been doing, which is to operate pretty responsibly. Most of our employees are based in Trinidad. There's an unbelievable education system down there and a history, so that the talent pool is endless down there for us. Everything too, from a diversity in the workforce place, that's been an easy thing to do. I think Trinidad's way ahead of its time on a lot of these things. When you look at our diversity in our ESG report, you can get some really good stats off of that. No lost time incidents in over 2.5 years. And James, our COO, we're just kind of knocking on wood. We really want to get that Cascadura facility on. As I say, pulling those plugs this weekend will be a big deal, and then we can start to put gas through the system. But it's a key focus for us for sure. And then the other thing that we want to do is capture some of the solution gas off of some of our old oil wells and really reduce our emissions. It's interesting, the Cascadura and the Coho facility basically are zero emission facilities. They run off of their own gas. There's no power lines coming in from the main grid. They're self-contained. They have very large solar panels for a lot of the equipment that we have. They're really, really exciting when you see them. They're really well contained, and it's great from an environmental point of view. So that's one of the things. And we do a lot of things for local charities and schools. We've just set up a foundation down there, so we'll be contributing through the foundation, and that's exciting as well. It's kind of turning us from that small exploration company into being a much bigger company. So it's exciting. And I think that's it. I'll leave it there, and we can take questions.
I think so. We got some questions for you, so I thought I'd try and get them in before we run out of time. Yeah. Yeah,
for sure.
Just to catch up, did you mention about the Cascadura Sea development well when it comes online? Did you give an actual time frame on that?
No, I didn't. Right now, the planning for those is depending on when the CAS facility, it comes on. We're looking at August, September for drilling. Probably drill 2 of them back to back. That would be ideal, just because you can move the rig. Right now, we have them on schedule for about mid-2024 is when they would actually come onto production.
Okay. One here. Do you have an internal chance of commercial success for the Royston flowing commercial rates? If you do, what is it?
When we started out at Royston, we were looking for something that of all the zones combined, like the wellbore itself would be producing something north of 500 barrels a day. That would be sort of a good commercial rate for us. I know in the economics we use something around 400, and it gives us a great rate of return. So that's exactly what our target is that we're looking at. I think people kind of have that number in their head for a combined rate. That would be a success for us.
Okay, good. So has the share price been repressed because institutional investors are proactively moving away from upstream oil and gas?
I don't sense that. When we go to London or Toronto, talk to investors in Toronto, there's those investors that still want to avoid in the energy space. They're going to high grade to be the ones that are, I would say more responsible, doing the right things, those kind of things. But I don't sense that, we're having people that actually move away. I think the share price that we're seeing, the reason it's been sort of flat to down certainly is it's just taken us a long time to bring these facilities on. You know, no new gas has been brought on onshore in Trinidad in 20 years. And let's face it, it took us a lot longer than we thought it was going to be to get it on. But now we've got Coho on, and we're going to get Cascadura on here in the next few days. So, you know, I think some of that gets behind us. But you know, the capital markets want excitement, and excitement isn't building 2 gas plants. So now we kind of got to go to that next stage where we ramp all this stuff up, right? You know, if you look at a plant at 200 million a day and a plant at 24 million a day, you got something that's like 25,000 BOEs a day of capacity, right? So, you know, kind of gives you an idea of what our opportunity is going forward.
Okay. What was the precocity in the sub-thrust against the intermediate? Are mud issues read the sub-thrust not flowing an issue?
Yeah, so what the question is just technically for people, when we drilled Royston, there's different thrusts, there's different sheets within the zone in that Herrera fairway that I talked about, and we test them individually because depositionally they're different. And basically in the subthrust, what we did is we got beautiful oil. It was 40 plus API oil, nice light oil, but it looked like the rock was really tight. It just couldn't give up any volume. You know, to give you an idea, we were getting rates of gallons per hour versus barrels per hour, which we'd like to see. So that kind of gives you an idea. You know, down the road, you might want to frack that. I know if we were in Canada here, certainly in the United States, you would certainly look at that. There's no question, and we will look at that. We've got the data. You know, to give you an idea, the plug that we put over top of that zone is retrievable, so we could go back down there if we wanted to. But now what we're trying to do is just get all the information from all the different sheets as we go up. It may have been a disappointment on the rate, but the fact that we got light oil was super positive. You couldn't have asked for anything more.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, do you think the Cascadura Sergi extends into the Balat East block?
You know, from what we've got right now, if you look at the engineering report, we don't have any reserves booked beyond our acreage. And certainly, I don't think it would be prudent for me to comment on that until we've got any acreage tied up. But at this point, we have no reserves booked onto that block.
Okay. Would it ever make sense to drill some of the zones identified in Royston with a horizontal well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, if you look at that tight subthrust, you could certainly look at it. We're deep. We're 10,000, 11,000 feet. So those would be some pretty good technology in what we want to look at. I think though, because it's such a thick zone, I think it would make more sense to frack it than to drill horizontal. That's kind of the way we're leaning right now. And there is that technology on the island. We just haven't done it in the past.
Okay, I've got time for one more, so I'm afraid, even though there are many more to go through. Do you expect to re-drill Chinook in 2024?
No. Chinook, you know, I think when we look at it, it looks different than anything we've seen. It just doesn't pan out. The rocks aren't there. It just does not look prospective. However, if you go back and look when you see this presentation on our site, if you go up dip to a project called Kokanee that's up dip from Chinook, it looks really, really interesting. So it would sort of be an extension of Chinook up, but we're not going to go back into Chinook. You know, we spent a bunch of money on it. It's just not economic, and that's going to happen. You know, really, basically, we drilled 4 exploration wells, and at this point, we've had 3 successes, which is pretty good odds at this point in what we see. Okay.
One line answer, if you can. Do you consider the company is fully funded?
Yes. Yes. You know, with Cascadura literally coming on in the next, 10 days, it starts generating, on a monthly basis more free cash flow than we had all of last year. Actually, the last 2 years combined. So that kind of gives you an idea how this changes everything, right? In the next 10 days. So yes, the answer to that is yes.
Okay, brilliant. Paul, I think we'd love to see you at some point in London at one of our events to answer all those other questions we couldn't get in tonight.
Yeah, it's been pretty quiet on our front. We've been pretty quiet while we've been putting up these facilities, but I think once the rig starts and we start to move forward, you're going to see a lot more of us. There's going to be a lot more to talk about.